So hello everyone, welcome to this session, which is going to be about the working group on engaging people with Parkinson's and clinical research. My name is Patricia Perez, I work in the Spanish Parkinson's Federation, and I am honored to introduce this session. So as the World Parkinson's Congress is going to be held in Barcelona, we thought that it would be nice to do this introduction in dual language. So I'm going to be switching from English and Spanish a little bit. Como decía, voy a hacer esta presentación en los dos idiomas. Bienvenidos a esta sesión sobre el grupo de trabajo de la participación de personas con Parkinson en la investigación clínica. Let me introduce you to my colleagues. This working group has been brilliantly co-chaired by Seheni Chowdhury from the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research and Helen Matthews from Cure Parkinson's, and other members are Caroline Schroeder from Parkinson's Foundation, Clay Bell from Parkinson's UK, Dom Graham and Fiona Montague from the European Parkinson's Disease Association, the EPDA, and Julie Wasecki from Parkinson Canada. You have available a chat where you can write comments or questions, and we will be taking them at the end. Comentaba que hay un chat disponible en el que pueden también hacer preguntas, comentarios. Al final de la sesión tendremos unos minutos para responderlas. So before giving the floor to my colleagues, I'd like to do a really brief introduction about this working group and what we have been up to. Así que antes de comenzar me gustaría hacer una pequeña introducción del grupo y de lo que hemos estado trabajando. So, as you know, the WPC support the availability of inclusive research and the involvement of people living with Parkinson's in shaping that research. So, this working group aims to develop global standards to support clinical research and to encourage the adoption of those standards, working with different key stakeholders. Entonces, como saben, pues el The World Parkinson Coalition apoya el acceso a la investigación inclusiva, ¿no? Y también a fomentar la participación de las personas con Parkinson en esa investigación. Entonces, es por ello que este grupo de trabajo lo que busca es desarrollar unas normas, unos estándares globales que un poco guíen la manera en la que se realiza esa investigación clínica y también fomente la participación de las personas en esa investigación. Y lo hemos estado haciendo en colaboración pues, con diferentes agentes clave como personas con Parkinson, la industria, investigadores, etc. So a really brief recap on our activity, as although my colleagues are going to explain in more detail all of these. We've identified working group objectives. Also, we surveyed the various experience by people with Parkinson's in participating and engaging in research. We replicated that initial findings through a survey for the EPDA members. And also, as a result, the EPDA created a research interest group to further explore relevant topics. Then we also surveyed industry stakeholders, also to have their point of view and to know more about what barriers and challenges they find. And finally, we began to collect different resources to develop a relevant resource toolkit. Entonces, un breve resumen sobre lo que hemos estado trabajando en este grupo, aunque mis compañeros van a ir comentando y explicando con más detalle todas estas actividades. Bueno, pues acordamos un objetivo común para este grupo. También, mediante una encuesta, estudiamos cuáles son las barreras o dificultades que tienen las personas con Parkinson para participar en investigación. Después también, digamos, continuamos con esa encuesta dirigiéndola específicamente a los miembros de la EPDA, de la Asociación Europea de Parkinson, y como resultado se ha creado también un grupo de interés en investigación, lo ha creado la EPDA pues para avanzar, para seguir conversando sobre esos resultados. También hemos realizado una encuesta dirigida a la industria farmacéutica para conocer también cuál es su experiencia en investigación y en qué dificultades y qué barreras se encuentran al intentar incluir a personas con Parkinson en la investigación. Y también estamos realizando una recopilación de recursos que puedan ser interesantes para hacer pues un conjunto de herramientas o un toolkit. So, at this point, I'm going to pass the floor on Seheni.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Suhini from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and what I'm going to be doing today is I'll be taking you through an activity that we recently completed, which was surveying the industry sector. As Patricia mentioned, one of our first working group activities was to survey the Parkinson's patient and supporter community to understand what their experience has been in engaging with and participating in clinical research. What we wanted to do was broaden that and get a real representation of that experience from various stakeholders that are engaged in clinical research. And so our next step was to survey the industry sector. And what we did is we put together a survey that was sent out with 91 individuals responding, representing 51 organizations that spanned the pharma, biotech, and health tech sectors. These respondents actually encompass a wide variety of roles within the industry sector so that we could really get a sense across different industry parameters what the experience from that sector has been in terms of engaging people with Parkinson's in clinical research. The focus of the survey was to identify what the current scope of that particular company may be in engaging people with Parkinson's in research, to identify both the opportunities and the challenges in increasing people with Parkinson's participation and engagement in research, and then to identify whether in a post-COVID world, new approaches or new ways of thinking about clinical research are being incorporated in these companies as they're thinking about upcoming clinical trial opportunities. So what were the key takeaways in the results that we received? So we identified that there were three top areas that industry respondents on a whole identified where they thought there was added value in people with Parkinson's getting engaged in the clinical research process. And first, that was in terms of identifying the unmet needs. Secondly, in terms of educating industry about Parkinson's disease. And thirdly, in preparing and reviewing study protocols and helping to develop and/or review the study concept. While most respondents agreed or were neutral about the value of engaging people with Parkinson's in study prioritization, design, and implementation, they did flag that there were concerns about how time-consuming that process could be. And a lot of the reasons why were given about either not knowing how to do it, about the compliance or the uncertainty about how what they were allowed to do from a compliance perspective, et cetera. Many of the recruitment barriers that were identified in the industry survey were actually mirrored by what we saw in our original survey to the Parkinson's community. And so barriers to recruitment, for example, were very similarly identified by both groups as being sort of, how do you access information about research opportunities? How do you communicate and raise awareness about research opportunities? How do you address fears or concerns about side effects or medication changes? More than half of the respondents to our industry survey also confirmed that the post-COVID world has created an opportunity to think differently about how to engage research, and we'll be thinking more about this over time. So I'll pass on now to my colleague, Dom.
Hello, and thank you, Suhini. Hi, everybody. So I'm Dom from the European Parkinson's Disease Association, the EPDA. And as many of you are aware, the EPDA is an umbrella organisation of national Parkinson's organisations across Europe. We currently have more than 20 of these organisations as our members. Last year, the EPDA was able to support this WPC clinical trial engagement working group by collecting intelligence from our member organisations on the experiences, barriers and solutions for people living with Parkinson's who are actually engaging or trying to engage with research and participating in clinical trials. What we did was conduct a clinical trial survey among our member organisations, and we received responses from 18 countries. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the key insights that we learned from the survey with our members. So firstly, research opportunities are generally promoted via individual research centres that promote their own research. And this seems to be the most common way people learn about trials, more so than via Parkinson's organisations and aggregated tools such as the Fox Trial Finder. Most common in terms of research were clinical trials of symptomatic treatments, and the least popular seemed to be genetic studies. terms of key barriers for people participating in clinical trials, well, as Sahini said, there are lots of similarities with what the industry highlighted as well. And from our survey, they included accessibility issues, including travel and transportation, a lack of information that was given to them as participants, fear of side effects and the changes to medication routines, a lack of consultation and support from healthcare professionals, inconvenient timing of the trials, and very importantly, poor communication before, during and after the trial, and a lack of collaboration between research centres, institutions and patient organisations. And importantly, a third of respondents did not feel that they had the necessary tools and resources available in their own language. These are just some of the key research's results from the survey, but there are more for those who are interested. And if you'd like more information about the results, do please let the EPDA know, and we'll happily share them with you. I'll now pass you over to my EPDA colleague, Fiona, who will explain what we did as a result of these results.
Thank you, Dom. So leading on from the survey, at the beginning of this year, we ran 2 focus groups with the EPDA member organisations to examine further some of the key themes that Dom's mentioned. We had great enthusiasm from our members, and so what we did was create a research interest group, which now meets on a monthly basis. So this is a friendly forum for members who have particular interest in Parkinson's research and clinical trials. And our aim really here is to bring people together to address these barriers and solutions, raise awareness and improve access to clinical trials, and explore other opportunities to support Parkinson's research. We currently have representation from Slovenia, Malta, Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, France, Italy, Iceland, UK, Canada and the US. And we look forward to more members joining us over the year. So through these meetings and the focus groups, we've identified 3 important areas that we really like to focus on. The first being aggregation of information. How do people access not only clinical trials, but the useful tools and resources on research in the right language? We feel this is a very important area that we want to explore. Secondly is education and training, improving the understanding of the clinical trial process for people with Parkinson's. But we've also identified the need to raise awareness and improve understanding for other stakeholders, such as researchers, academics, and healthcare professionals. And then finally is data. What data is meaningful to collect and how? So this is not just data that's collected in clinical trials, but also real world data, such as that in health records and devices and apps. Consent is another area we're looking at. How broad can we go? And we've also discussed the benefits of sharing data, but we have to balance this with trust and security. Patients need control, and that starts to understand how to access and share data to support Parkinson's research. So now I'd like to pass over to my colleague, Carlin.
Thank you, Fiona. Hi, I'm Carlin Schrader with the Parkinson's Foundation. I'm going to discuss our ideas for collaborating with the Equity Working Group. As I think we all know, clinical trials tend to include, in the majority, white men who are fairly well educated and have a higher income. We realize it's critically important that we have all populations engaged in research, not just participating in trials, but helping to drive how research is done. And that not only means people with different stages of Parkinson's, people with young onset versus a more traditional age of onset, but of course, we're also talking about ethnic and racial diversity, whatever that means for the particular region of the world we may be in. People in rural settings still living in the country versus people in urban settings who are living in the city, people of different income status, the LGBTQ community, and looking at issues that may be specific to sex, of differences in men and women. So we want to be sure that, as I said, every single one of these populations is included in the research process. So we realized it was critical to make a plan to work with the Equity Working Group. And our plan is laid out here in these 4 points. Firstly, we want to work together to map the basic principles of involvement in trials. And from this, we want to pilot the Health Equity Advisory Checklist concept. So the Health Equity Group is making a checklist to ensure that equity is included in all aspects of how we are partnering with the Parkinson's community. We want to take that concept and ensure that we have a checklist for equity standards and inclusivity standards in clinical research. We want to co-create a clinical trials equity statement, and we want to pilot a sort of map of involvement. So there are already maps of how to involve and engage people with Parkinson's in research. We can use those to overlay how we should ensure that we are including representative populations in every step of the research process and in an appropriate manner. Going back to what Fiona was saying, building trust, ensuring that we have open and transparent communications. We want to identify the qualities and skills of trusted community leaders to act as a bridge between the research and communities. So who are those people who communities go to for information about research, who communities trust to teach them about research and to help them understand the process? We need to build partnerships with those community leaders to ensure that we can engage all populations in research. And finally, we will be collaborating in each other's committee work and joining each other's meetings so that we continue to have communication and continue to build on these plans to ensure that all populations are included in research. From here, I believe I'm turning it over to Julie.
Thank you, Carolyn. We also have been collaborating with a technology working group. And in our first meeting, one of the biggest challenge that we're facing in this area is there is a lot of digital aid. There are a lot of digital aids out there that have yet to be evaluated and even compiled. So the first thing we did was broker introduction to Critical Path for Parkinson's and MDS Technology Task Force, so that the technology working group can at least work with them and see what else is out there, what has been evaluated, and so forth. And also share knowledge of any digital outcomes currently being developed or evaluated in clinical trials. And that list will feed into the inventory that the technology working group is working on. So that's one of their first goals, is to have an inventory of the technical aids out there, so that we can at least start to understand what has been evaluated, what works, and so forth. And also, when completed, we plan to share the outcomes outcome scoping exercise for the University of Plymouth. The HOPE list, for those of you who don't know what the HOPE list is, it's a list of Parkinson's therapies in development, compiled and regularly updated by Dr. Kevin McFarthing. And other efforts we would share with them as well. And currently, COVID has also given us an opportunity to use more technology in care. So that's one of the things as well, and clinical trials. That's one of the things we will share with them. Understands the technology is being implemented in trial delivery in Parkinson's as a result of COVID-19. So I will now pass on to my colleague, Helen Matthews, for Wrapup.
Thank you very much, Julie. So as Patricia mentioned in her introduction, one of the key focus for our working group is to try and create some shared standards for global clinical research. So some of the concepts that Carlin was talking about absolutely would be embraced in these shared standards. And we would like these to be adopted internationally, used by researchers, clinicians, industry, and the Parkinson's community as a guide to ensure high quality, patient-centered clinical research. We now need your help. We're going to be breaking into roundtables to try and discuss this in a little bit more detail. I'm asking you what you think the key ingredient is to high quality clinical research. We will also be exploring what messages we might want to be giving to researchers and clinicians about clinical research. What messages should we be sending to industry? And what about the broad messages to the Parkinson's community? We really need your help to start shaping this piece of work because we feel it is hugely important. We feel that this would be a really great opportunity to make sure that we have consistency in the way that we're offering clinical research globally. Just to say thank you all very much for joining us. We're very passionate about what we're doing in this working group, and we now really need your help to shape this next piece of work so that we will be hopefully able to present it when we get to Barcelona in next year.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much again for the great discussion. If your group was like the group that I participated in, we certainly could have used an extra 25 minutes or an hour to keep the conversation going. That being said, what Helen and I wanted to do was to give you a little bit of a sense of what some of the conversations focused on in the breakout groups, and then talk about next steps. And I'm just going to cover what the breakout group on focused on creating standards for global clinical research sort of address. So one of the first things that we did was we asked individuals in the roundtable to share with us what they thought the key ingredient was for high quality research. And it was really interesting to sort of see the spectrum of answers. It went everywhere from, there's a lot of best practices that are siloed and are not shared across groups. So people are reinventing the wheel, to being better about communicating opportunities. So you truly get the right individuals engaged in the right research opportunities, which will only benefit the ability to get answers to important research questions. To, not surprisingly, given this past year, a real focus on ensuring that aspects of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion are really integrated across the spectrum of research, from thinking about what diversity means, to how it's represented in materials and outreach and communications, to working with local groups to make sure we're tapping into networks to bring people, to raise awareness and communicate and bring people into the research fold, to ensuring that we keep a constant focus of DEI in every aspect of the research spectrum. Another very key outcome that was discussed was linked to a little bit DEI was make sure that we're actually capturing and sharing the demographic information so that we get a sense of how we're doing and who we're reaching out to, and are we making progress in the high level about engaging people in research, but then engaging everyone in research, and where we could do better, and then have our resources shifted to ensure that we are really doing what we need to do to kind of, again, ensure that research is available for everyone. The second part of our breakout group was really focused on sort of, if there were messages that you would want to give in the research community, what would it be? And I think that, again, this was very much related to communication, which has been a constant thread in the survey results we got from the Parkinson's community, from the industry stakeholders, etc., which is that communication is key and clear language is key. Keep it simple. What are you asking people to do? Why should they do it? Why is it important? How could it impact their lives in a positive way? There was also a lot of discussion about the focus on sharing results back with the community. If you don't share the results, how can you expect people to raise a hand and want to be part of the process and partner with researchers? And there were some interesting ideas about really making sure that sharing results is part and parcel of any research funding agreement that is given to support clinical research. There was also a little bit of talk about, some of the realities that we learned in this COVID world, which is that the internet right now is the go-to for a lot of resources and information, but it's a Wild West. It's not necessarily accurate. It's not necessarily appropriate for where an individual is in his or her journey of thinking about research participation. And so how do we shift away from Google being the go-to to really sharing where groups could go to, what organizations, and there are multiple organizations across the globe who can play this role. How do we make sure that they know that's where you should go to for the right type of information and from a really trusted source? So there was a lot of really good information. The positive is that I think our working group has touched, maybe not on all of these, but on quite a few. And so we're starting those conversations, and we're starting to already think about how to integrate that in next steps. And I think that's a great segue for you, Helen, to talk about where this working group is going over the next year as we head to Barcelona.
Absolutely. Sahini, thank you so much. Thank you all. I think your insights are going to be hugely, hugely important for us. One thing I would ask is that if anybody did fill in a piece of paper and do a paper activity, please do feel free to photograph those and send those to us, either Sahini or I, and we'd be absolutely thrilled to aggregate that information. There are some key activities we are going to be working on over the next few months, particularly looking at resources and information, and trying to build a toolkit, understanding what languages resources already exist in, and what translation piece needs to be done to make sure that we have really accessible information going forward. Currently, that's looking a bit like a tool shed rather than a toolkit, but eventually it'll be a toolkit, we hope. We are going to keep progressing with trying to understand what would make really robust global standards, and we would love your help in that. So please, again, if you're interested in helping us, let us know. We would love to hear from you. And then the final aspect of our work is that we are working towards next summer in Barcelona, and we will be working in the clinical research village space and trying to turn that into a really dynamic experience for everyone coming to World Parkinson Congress. Feels really important. So again, we'd love your help and support in moving that forward. So without further ado, I just want to thank you all so much for being part of our session today, but also really to thank our working group, who are a phenomenal group of really passionate and committed individuals. So thank you all so much. And from Sahini and I, that's a goodbye and thank you.